So welcome to another video from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we are not reviewing anything. We just wanted to make a video talking about introductory war games. It is one of the most asked questions that we get, like, oh, I've never played a war game before,
Right.
I'm new, where should I start? What should I play? And
it's actually a great question, because if you start with the wrong game, I think it can really change your opinion of what a war game can be.
yes, it can, something's going to be a turn off, something's a turn on. And then the other aspect of it is how introductory do you need it to be? Mm-hmm. So some people have extensive backgrounds in other aspects of gaming, whether it's tabletop miniatures or Euro-style board games. And so everyone comes at it a little bit at a different angle. Mm-hmm. So I think what we're going to put together today is a little bit of everything, but it's here are games that are easy to learn, but that are good and engaging and give you something wargaming kind of esque, right?
Yep.
So where do you want to start?
Well, and real quick, I think a war game, we have this discussion all the time. What's a war game? I don't know that I want to get into it and have a 45-minute discussion about it. But to me, a war game is something that has conflict.
Yes.
It has, area control, area movement. It also can have, it can have cards. It can have dice. Some people don't believe it's a war game if it has dice or cards.
Right.
But I'm more liberal in my definition of that. To me, as long as it covers some form of a historical conflict and has some form of back and forth conflict
and
fighting,
that's the main focus of it.
Then to me it's a war game.
Yeah, that to me it's got to be that's the driving force, because there's plenty of games that we play and love that have combat in them, but I would not consider a war game because it's about so much of the other engine building or card drafting, things like that. So these ones are hopefully you would sit down head to head, one person's trying to win, and you're fighting over something. Yeah. Typically speaking.
And actually, these games, they have counters. Some of them have blocks. Some of them have cards. Some of them don't. There's a good variety here that we have laid out on the table.
Yeah, so, and that's something I think we consciously try to give a variety of different things, because different people have different tastes. Yeah. So, where do you want to start? What do you think?
You go ahead and pull one off.
So, let's start with something that is quite well known. Yeah. And we're going to start with Memoir 44 from Days of Wonder. This has been a lot of people's first war game. Mm-hmm. It is made by a quite mainstream games company, Days of Wonder, now owned by Asmodee. It is a 2-player game as you buy it in the box. This one has little plastic miniatures, so you have little tanks or men or artillery pieces. It is card-driven in the sense that you have a hand of cards that enables you to play in certain sections of the board, and it's very quick. Game takes 30 to 40 minutes, typically.
Rules light.
Yeah, and it's this uses what's called the Commands and Colors system by Richard Borg. There is a lot of them in this series. Another introductory one I would recommend is Battle Cry.
Yes.
Which is a Civil War kind of version as well. Some of those games in the system do get a little bit more on the complex and crunchy side.
Like Napoleonics.
Yeah, so if you want to kind of really ease into it, something like Memoir 44, something like Battle Cry, maybe Ancients at a stretch.
It'll wet your whistle for the system and give you an understanding of what it is and what it's trying to do.
But yeah, you get a lot of battles in here, 2-player, plays quickly, a nice way to kind of ease into wargaming, and a lot of people's first game is this.
And I would also say this one is, I think, very well made for kids. Yes. You could teach your children, to me, probably around that age of 8. Yeah. Kids can start to think a little abstractly and a little more than just what's in front of my... I play My Little Orchard with my daughters all the time. I'm not sure they're ready for that. Right. But that's something I think you can start around 8 and teach your children a love of war games.
Yes, and I think that's kind of half of what it's marketed towards. It's not just a big heavy war game; it's a family game almost.
But I know a lot of old dudes buy those and will hunt down the expansions that they can't get because they love it that much, because it's simple, fairly basic, but it still gives you that flavor. Yeah, gives that historical flavor too.
So that's Memoir 44 from Days of Wonder. That's a great place to start.
Okay. So I've got a stack of games here, and we'll just kind of go back and forth, but this is a game we actually played a couple of weeks ago and really liked it.
Yes.
This is from Hollandspiel. It's called With It or On It. It is a Ancients light war game where you use counters that are set up on a a square board. It's only squares. It's not hexagons. So many of you might be saying, "Oh, it doesn't have hexagons. It's not a war game." But it's a game where you're fighting. You're fighting against your opponent, your Greeks and Persians, or other
Assyrians, maybe.
Yeah, like other armies, and it's a simple system of move. You can't move and fight. We talked about that. Yeah. You cannot move and fight in the same action. You use these chits, and there's 6 of them, and the move and fight is on the same. So it teaches you to plan ahead, understand what your enemy's abilities are, and how you can maybe get around those. So it teaches some strategy, but then there's some good luck factor in it and some fun factor. But it's also about unit classifications and what was that word that they called it? I can't remember. But your units have different ratings. So an A unit class against a C unit is going to hit a lot more often than a C trying to hit an A.
Yes, and that's what I like about this game, especially for an introductory game, is it gives you have a range of commands, but it's a choice of effectively 4 different things that you can do.
Right.
So you're never going to be overwhelmed in that instance. It has different unit types, which for Ancients is pretty important, but again, there's like 4 different types.
Yeah, it's not like you have 13 to have to worry about.
And so you're not having to memorize and reference a ton of different stuff, and then it's A, B, or C. Maybe there's D classes. So it's unit quality, unit type, and a couple of things that they can do.
Yeah.
It has a lot of those things you would expect from an Ancients war game, but it keeps them up to a really small palette so you can learn it easily and play it quickly, and the games don't take very long either.
Yeah. And I think I made this comment when we reviewed the game. To me, I really got the feel of being the commander, trying to understand how my different groups of units could be used, my wings, I think they're called.
Yeah.
To be used in order to effectively attack and, in essence, destroy the enemy.
Yes.
So it taught me a lot of that tactical element and would really be a game that people could learn those kind of concepts to then use in more complex games.
Yes.
But a good time, 45 minutes to an hour, With It or On It from Hollandspiel.
Yes. My next game is somewhat more traditional in the sense that this has a hex grid on it. This is Tank on Tank, and this is West Front. There's also an East Front version. This is from Lock and Load. This is a very thin, kind of small game. It's very introductory. It's not complex particularly. I know people that do play this with their very young children, and they're able to kind of get it. And you have a number of tanks and moving around a little bit, and blowing each other up.
Yeah.
It's fast and furious, good action. But again, I think the actual rules are 8 pages. It's a quick and dirty way to get into a more kind of seeing the hex and counter on the board, and it's not overwhelming. There's not all these supply rules and command and all this stuff. Moving around, shooting.
Yeah.
That's what Tank on Tank is. This would be a nice place to start and get in your first maybe hex-based game as well.
A good learning game, I think.
Yes. And there's also expansions available, so you can get some like the big tanks, all that kind of stuff.
So if you like it, you can add some elements and different units and play more of it.
Yes, so that's Tank on Tank. There's West Front, East Front from Lock and Load.
Another game that we played from Lock and Load was Bloody Mohawk. Very simple.
Very simple,
kind of a tactical French and Indian war game. I think those are along the same veins. I think this is they're different. They're just different.
Yeah.
But, Lock and Load, a lot of their games are fairly complex with the Lock and Load tactical system, although I don't know that they're complex.
No,
they're just involved.
Yeah, usually, I wouldn't recommend that as someone's first war game necessarily, because there's a lot there. If you're trying to ease into it, something like Tank on Tank
would get you in it.
Use that as a stepping stone to get you to Nations at War, or Lock and Load Tactical. That's a good way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next game on my list actually is from a company that really, I think, specializes in lighter war games that are more introductory. They have some other games, like the Civil War Brigade series.
Yes, Brigade Battle series.
Shiloh and Antietam, or Antietam, as you want to mention. But this game, and there's another game like this that uses almost the same engine. It's called 1759 Quebec.
Yes.
Siege of Quebec, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
This one is called Freeman's Farm, 1777, designed by Maurice Suckling. We played this almost a year ago. A very good game, very interesting game that worries about spatial relationships of units on the battlefield and controlling key points. So if you control a certain area, you get some bonuses to attack there. So it's kind of those initial concepts of command of your units, control of certain areas and objectives to then benefit you on the battlefield. It uses wooden bits in the form of formations. Just a very interesting game. Uses some cool card-driven. It's a card-driven system that has some economics about it. You can get cubes that you then use to buy new cards. It just has a lot of very interesting elements. It plays in 45 minutes.
Yeah.
It's a fun experience no matter what. Mainly because of the cards. There's so much variety there.
This one's quite different from a lot of other war games in the sense that a lot of the time your pieces are going to be quite static on the board as well.
Yes, they don't move around very much. They may move one space or two areas, but that's it.
Yeah, this is an interesting one where you're also kind of looking, and so what that does is there's a matrix almost of this guy is positioned here, so he can attack this person and this person.
But he can't shoot this guy.
So you get a bit of history based on, he's out of range, or like didn't even know they were there. He's engaged with these guys. It's a neat little experience, and there's also there's a number of games coming out in this series as well. So a lot to explore there too.
I think I also enjoyed this one because I think the production value is very high. The wooden units were very cool and really gave me a nice feel of looking over the battlefield. So a very good jumping off point, a good introduction to a very cool system that teaches some good history.
Yes.
All right.
So I have here, I know we talked about doing mostly 2-player games. This I would probably not recommend as a 2-player game.
It's better with 3 to 5.
This is get us. I think this does. The base game does 4.
4. The expansion I think does a 5th.
So get 4 players together, and this is an unbelievably good game.
Very good.
This one is much longer than the games we've put out so far. It's probably twice or 3 times as long. This one takes a couple hours.
Yeah, 2-3 hours I think is pretty normal.
But it is why I say this is introductory is because. If you've played kind of any kind of Euro-style games, this is a deck builder.
Yes.
So you'll be very familiar with half the game already. You have the pool of your cards available, you're building your deck to put more stuff into it according to what you want to do, but you are getting units out on the board, building stacks, moving through regions, trying to fight over Europe, Central Europe, and the Mediterranean, trying to become the Emperor.
Yep.
Trying to kill the Emperor, trying to usurp the Emperor, trying to accrue victory points by doing all this stuff and conquesting places. It is a very, very cool game.
Yes.
And I typically find that if you have 4 people together, it's almost easier to learn rules because you're kind of bouncing any questions off of each other. It's not one person setting the rules. I don't know. Learning together, I think, is a good experience as well. But not an overly complicated game by any stretch of the imagination as well.
But I feel the 2 or 3 times we've played this, it really has felt meaty. Like it's. I think the concepts are introductory, but man, after playing it, you're like, that was good.
Yeah,
like I felt like I was controlling an empire and trying to expand, and just really cool. Lots of neat elements there.
Yeah, this is. I would consider this I would consider this a war game. It's a war game.
Yeah,
but
I think it's a hybrid.
Yes.
But you're fighting and controlling, so it definitely is a war game.
Yeah, I like this one a lot. Time of Crisis. There's also an expansion.
Yep.
There's a bunch of like AI bots in there that you can use, and
some new cards
and
that are
a bunch
very
of
cool.
new, very cool cards.
It's kind of interesting. I feel like that expansion is kind of like added ammunition to drive home certain strategies.
Yeah,
and I use the military a lot, so it's like some of the spiculum, my goodness. Being able to kill people before they can even shoot you or, fire back is so powerful. So, very cool.
Yeah, Time of Crisis from GMT, excellent war game. Had a good time with this.
I love that game, frankly.
But yeah, again, that's a multiplayer game.
Yeah.
With 2, you have got, it's not as dynamic.
You can still play it, and they even have the solitaire bot where you can add in a 3rd and a 4th player controlled by a matrix. And it's passable. We played it that way one time.
It's fine, but it's a little bit more bookkeeping over here, and then it's it's not as dynamic as it can be. When you've got four,
with four
it's awesome.
We tried to play that with Rodney from Watch It Played, and we just were never able to.
The time
he wanted to, but yeah. So my next game on this list is Lincoln, and this came out in 2017, I want to say, from Worthington Publishing. It was a partnership between Plastic Soldier Company, or PSC Games, and Worthington. Martin Wallace designed this, so you know it's good. It's really got a great system. This is a deck builder, but really it's more clear to say it's a deck destroyer or a deck destruction tool. Because what happens is you have 3 different decks. You start with one deck at the beginning of the game. One side or the other usually is weaker or stronger at the beginning. Certain actions require you to throw certain cards away, like when you build your more powerful units, or sometimes the events. It'll be like throw away after playing because the event is that good. Then you move into the second year or the second deck, and it starts to switch. Maybe the guy that had the advantage the first turn, his second deck isn't as powerful. So it's like you're using and destroying the power or building the power of your deck over a 3 or 4 turn. I think this one had 3 turns, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, it was 3 decks, yeah.
But it's a deck builder. It's kind of an area control, point-to-point movement, and it covers the American Civil War. So we really liked this. We found it to be very engaging, very entertaining, and a lot of strategic thought need to go in how you use your different units.
Whilst at the same time, it is not overwhelming on the map.
No, not at all.
There's really, 3 or 4 avenues of attack that you can go through, and you'll mess around in the Shenandoah for a bit, but like in the Midwest, it's a bit more straightforward.
Yeah.
And this has a good narrative to it. The Confederacy start very strong, and then like their deck bottoms out.
Right.
At the same time, the Union deck is very weak to begin with and gets progressively stronger, and there's this crossing over point.
Yeah.
And as things start to change. A very neat game. One thing I will say about this is if you go onto Board Game Geek or online, you will probably hear a lot of people
it's broken.
bitching and moaning about how broken it is. It is not broken.
It was fixed.
That was seen before this ever went to production, and it was fixed. There was a problem with the Washington D.C. space. They immediately fixed it, and so don't let anything like that be a detractor to you.
Yeah.
This is a beautiful game, and it is not broken in any way in that sense. There's also Worthington recently put out Struggle for Europe, which uses the same system, but it's a World War II setting. Yeah. That one's a bit more open, tactically speaking. But
there's a lot more ways you can move.
But it's also a very good game. Yeah. And it uses the same system, so it could also serve as a good introduction as well.
But I do think this is introductory because, like you said, there's only 2 or 3 real avenues of attack.
Yeah, it's easier to be a bit more focused in what you're trying to do on the board.
Yeah. And the deck building makes it feel comfortable, so...
And it's gorgeous.
It's a good, solid game. We played this 2 or 3 times and really had a good time every time we played it. So, Lincoln from PSC Worthington Games.
So I think we're going to go to our first... Is that our first actual block war game?
I think so,
yes. So, this is Richard III, and this is from a company called Columbia Games. Columbia is like the block war game guys. They make a lot of block war games, most of which use a similar core system, or at least some of them do. I recommend this one, though, as introductory because the games are shorter.
Yes.
Some of the other games are like 2 or 3 times as long as this. You can play a game of this in like 20 minutes.
20 to 30 minutes, Because there's only about a dozen spaces.
And... this has 3 scenarios in it, which you can link together as a campaign, which is cool. But... your action is usually quite focused in, 2 or 3 regions based on kind of the setup and the scenario. So not only is this a block war game, it is also a more traditional card-driven game. Yep. You have a hand of cards, they'll have values on them, and those values, like this is the number of blocks you can activate, or it's the number of units you can, something like that. Some of them do. I think some of them have events. Is that true?
They do. Yeah.
And you can trigger like a special ability on that card. Yeah. But you're moving these blocks, and what's cool is the blocks are hidden. So they have stickers on one side. So I've got all my units lined up facing me. So you can see where my units are and how many I have, but not what's on them. And they rotate and they have stickers on them to show their strength point value. So you don't know who or how strong they are. So you will be forced to go into certain combats, and you're like, it's so nervy, because you're like, my goodness, I'm sending in these good blocks, and you might have really good ones, and one of us is going to come out really badly. Yeah. Or you might be bluffing with your two little one-strength guys, like,
nothing.
Come at me, like, don't, you know. And they're just like, you're just praying that they don't move in there. Very, very neat. I also like the theme, but the length of the game, how short they are, makes this a really good intro place as well.
Well, and the other thing I really like about block war games is not only the fog of war, but it teaches you, how you should be, your disposition of forces. A lot of times in these games, and I don't think in Richard III it had it, but if you attack a tank with an infantry guy, you're gonna struggle. And you don't know that a lot of times, so you may go into it and you're like, oh crap, that didn't work out.
Yeah.
But I remember playing this game and laughing. I mean, we've had such a good time with the game because it creates such an interesting narrative and things happen. And I don't know, it's just a very quick, light, fun game.
Yes, good intro.
And really our intro to block war games. I think this was our first one.
Yep, first block war game, but it's also a card-driven game as well. Yep. So you're getting a couple of really nice concepts that are used in a lot of other war games.
Yeah.
So it's easy to spring off in either of those two directions, having played
good
this
base.
one. So yeah, this is Richard III from Columbia.
Such a good game. Yeah. Here's a game that is really solely it's a card-driven game. It covers the Russian Revolution in 1917. It's called Dual Powers. I'm trying to remember the name of the company. Sorry, it is
TW Games.
What is it?
It's TW
Games, yeah. Thunderworks Games, I think is what it is. So it's very fast-playing, 40 to 45 minutes. It also has a solo, but it teaches you the concept of hidden units and hidden markers that you don't necessarily know what's there, kind of like the block war games, and you go in and you try to do battles. Now, the battles are different than full-pitched battles.
Right.
It's more of a battle of ideology, etc., but it uses some very interesting concepts like leaders. Leaders give certain benefits or bonuses. I just think the game is very fun and very interesting, and is a game that I think a lot of Euro game players can get into, enjoy, and start understanding what conflict and war games are.
What's nice about this one also is it teaches... So there's 6 areas on this map.
Yeah, not big.
A very tight board, and so you get good tension from that. But the game's also short, so if you mess it up, it's not the end of the world. Yeah. If you haven't invested 4 hours, I just got crushed.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but how tight that is, you get into some really nice tactical decision-making about how many guys do I risk putting over here and leaving this open?
Yeah.
Because you only have 3 spaces that are yours, and I can't afford to lose one. There's a lot of really tough decision-making to be made in that one, too.
And I think that's one thing I love about war games in general, is having to make a decision.
Yeah.
Make a decision, and you have to make a decision in every game you play, but those strategic decisions of, do I go this way or do I go that way or focus on this? And I really liked this game. Was fun. I enjoyed this quite a bit. I tried the solo system. It also was fairly good.
Okay.
A different experience than our 2-player experience. A little less back and forth, a little more randomness, but definitely a good game. So Dual Powers Revolution from Thunderworks Games.
So, next one, Brave Little Belgium. This is also from Hollandspiele. Same guys that did With It or On It. This is a 2-player game, and this one is... So, a couple things about this. This is a nice introductory war game because the situation seems dire. This is about the Germans rolling through Belgium. At the beginning
of
World War One. So we basically know what's going to happen, and
the game knows what's going to happen.
Yes, it is possible to win as the Allies, right? As the Entente, I suppose you'd call it. But your winning is preventing...
Just not losing.
Yes, preventing what happened slightly better than what happened. So a win for the Entente might not feel great because you're still going to be crushed halfway across the board.
Yeah.
But I think that's also quite an important war game lesson because a lot of war games are a retelling or an exploration of history, a lot of which is not a 50-50.
No.
A lot of it is historical simulation. You'll get one-sided battles. And so you get some good, almost sportsmanship concepts from this, like, it is okay to lose. It is okay to get crushed on one side, because war games aren't always about playing a game.
Right.
Sometimes they're about exploring history, trying to rewrite and do a little bit better, but doing a little bit better, we're trying to keep that within a structure of maybe some kind of realism. So that's something that I appreciate from this game, that it can teach. But it is a very simple game from the standpoint of, you have a number of stacks of units, it's point-to-point movement, and as such the map isn't massive, so you're not going to be overwhelmed with your choices there. There's a little bit of, with the Germans, kind of trying to push it. You're trying to push your luck. If you aren't making advances fast enough, there's a risk-reward aspect to, you can push your units further, but you go onto this atrocities track, and you can lose the game that way.
Yeah, and remember, it's a chit pull system, so you're pulling a chit that says, activate the first German army.
Yeah.
And the game can end before all chits have been pulled, so not all the armies can be activated necessarily. So those Germans, that's where you have those choices. Do I push my luck and risk an atrocity to go ahead and force that German army to activate?
Yes.
And to me, that's one of the beauty in that, particularly for the German side. The real beauty, for me, for the Entente, is the concept of roadblocks. Or speed bumps necessary. It's not roadblocks. You're not going to stop
You're just
anybody.
trying to slow them down and force them to invest more time than they have.
Yeah. If you can keep somebody at a spot for one more turn than historically, man, you've made a good, and you got to do that like 2 or 3 times and you can win the game. So it teaches you, fall back, consolidate, go to a choke point, and put up a better defense than you normally would.
Yeah.
I like that concept about playing the Belgians.
Yeah, this game is about trying to mess up the Schlieffen plan as best as possible.
Yeah.
And
it's hard to do.
You'll never defeat the German army and move them back into Germany. That's not what's supposed to happen. But but you get, that's some neat learning aspects that I think war games, you're going to have to learn that pretty quick, because some games are fairly brutal. This does a really good job of that. You also get the chit pull, like you said.
Yep.
So, I pull a chit. It's the German First Army, so we can activate that stack. And so
pretty simple.
You might get 3 or 4 activations in a row, and then the Entente gets a play. So that's neat. How we love that system. It's a good solo system as well, but that's a good way to learn that new mechanic as well.
Yeah, and then the units, I think they have just one symbol on them. Basically, they have the NATO symbol on the counters, and then they have a die.
Yeah,
and that die tells you what you need to roll to hit with that unit. Your cavalry are 5. Your infantry are like 4, and I think your real powerful guys are 3s.
There's some Germans that are 3s.
Yeah,
now.
so it's very simple. You're not going to see, a movement value. You're not going to see a combat or a defense value. It's just a die symbol, and that's cool because it's teaching you, trying to help you understand what those concepts are.
8 pages of rules, plays in an hour or less.
To an hour, yeah.
Very nice way to learn the chip pull mechanic, and gives you a nice. A tough tactical situation, which is a good learning opportunity as well.
Well, it reminds me of a lot of East Front games that we've played that, one side or the other, usually the Russians, or unless it's late in, in the Operation Barbarossa where Uranus has kicked off, you know, but it's like, I got to learn how to take some hits, roll back, and try to regroup and fight. So,
and it's an important concept of wargaming.
Yeah, very important.
You should have, I think you should have a 50-50 chance of winning. But what winning looks like is not what winning looks like in a lot of other games.
Right.
So that does a good job of showing you that.
Yeah. The next game I have on my list is a new game, came out in 2019. This is Europe Divided, published by Phalanx and designed by David Thompson and... Is it Trevor Benjamin? Nope, that's...
It's Chris Marling.
Chris Marling, sorry. One of David's other design partners. This game, I feel like everyone has said it was Twilight Struggle Light, but I don't feel like that's what it was.
People say that about a lot of things. People say that about Watergate, which is not true.
No.
They say it about 13 Days, which is
not
slightly
really true.
more
Closer.
true, but not really.
So this game is an opposed, card-driven game where one side is controlling NATO and the other side is controlling Warsaw Pact. and you're fighting back and forth for the control of Europe.
I guess it's not. It's
it's
post-Cold War, so it's US. It's just Russia.
Yeah, Russia. But you're opposing each other with cards. You're moving units around the board to control certain key areas. And each round, you're going to score a number of victory points based on cards that you drew, the objective cards.
Those are so cool.
And it's like, well, if you control this and this, you get 2 points. Or if you controlled this and this, you got 3 points. And you're trying in some ways to figure out what your opponent's trying to do so that you can stop them. But you're also trying to do what you're going to do. And I think you have 2 choices, if I remember correctly. But it's just an interesting back and forth. There's some simple combat mechanics, movement. It's mainly an area control game. But once again, it teaches you those concepts of moving units around the board to put pressure on or protect certain areas. And I just found it to be a very interesting and really competitive back and forth tug of war.
And I like the asymmetry in this.
Yes.
Which is something also war games typically have to some extent. One player is playing the Russians, where you've just got all these red units that you're trying to move around. But then the European player has both the NATO military, but also that the EU kind of the economic influence.
So you have 2 different kinds of units.
And so there's a whole... Playing asymmetrically is always something I enjoy in a game. This teaches that too. But this is more of an area control influence style game. There is combat. You will move units around as well, but you're also trying to influence areas, which I think that's where the... Twilight Struggle comparison comes in, but I would think that's disingenuous.
Well, and I think the other comparison to Twilight Struggle is, if you remember in Twilight Struggle, you've got little counters that have, 1 influence, 2 influence, and you're trying to build those up to take control of that territory. And you're trying to build it up so it's more than your opponents in that same area. This uses dice to do that. It works very well, kind of an interesting, and you kind of say, well, why didn't we do this on Twilight Struggle? Because it works so well.
I've seen people do it.
But it's that concept of, I've got more influence than you, I control the area. Oh, I just lost 2 influence, you now control the area.
Yeah.
So it teaches that concept of keep driving on certain objectives if that's key to your strategy, or make them fight for it and then let it go because it really didn't matter to you. Sometimes winning in this game is by forcing your opponent to focus too much on something they didn't necessarily want to focus on.
Yeah, if you can tie people up in a quagmire, you can win.
Yeah.
And that's also a pretty good concept to learn for war games too. If you can distract people or get people to do things they shouldn't be doing.
Because there's always objectives, and if you can get somebody to really focus on here because you're pushing here, you've won, right? Because you've taken their resources and they can't do what they want to do sometimes.
And again, that scales from a big strategic game like this. Oh, you're all tied up with all your units in Georgia.
Yeah.
Whereas you can take that down to a tactical level where you've got 5 guys in a bush.
Yeah.
And you've got a machine gun over here pinning units. And you send out 1 guy as a feint.
Yeah.
And if you focus over there, I've already got you.
Yep.
It's amazing how some of these principles scale as well.
Yeah, very fascinating. Anyway, very interesting design, good game. It looks good on the table, and is a very, very interesting game.
So my next game I want to talk about is a game called Sekigahara.
Such a good game.
Very, very good game. This incorporates both, it's a card-driven game, and also you have block units as well. So I have
hidden.
I have hidden block units. This one's a little bit different from some of the other CDGs, though, because your cards are used to power your units. So you might initiate, or someone initiates a battle with you, and you've got all these blocks. You can only use the blocks with which you have the cards to match, basically. So the bluffing is very, very intense in this one. If you get attacked somewhere and you were just kind of half joking about you don't have the cards to power those, they basically flee and don't fight. And there's this whole it's the honor and all this cool stuff. It's really, really, really cool, but the board, whilst it's big, it's like a 22 by 34 map.
Huge board.
It's point to point. And there aren't that many points.
No.
So again, it's tactically or strategically not massively overwhelming.
Yeah.
And the cards aren't overly complicated with like a billion different things on them.
Yeah.
but you get some really, really tense, and it's a beautiful game on the board as well.
Well, and like many of the games that we like to play, it has objectives. You know, you need to get certain areas because that produces...
Yeah, those are the fortresses.
The supply or the food. And if you don't have those and you can't fight, you can't have as many units. So it teaches those concepts. Also, I think that concept of feinting and bluffing is very important in this game. In this one. Particularly because it's a fog of war hidden unit type situation. But a very enjoyable experience. I feel like this one, yes, is an introductory, but to play it well, I feel like you really got to understand the game.
But I think that makes a good game, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to learn the system, but
Tough to master.
But you're gonna invest time in playing again and again and again, and it will become more rich to you as well.
Yeah.
This is, I think, one of the larger rule books out of the ones we've said so far. It's not, 4 pages like some of these.
Yeah.
So you do get some nice meat in this, but if you've played any other board games, this should not be too much of a stretch to pick up.
Yeah. I love Sekigahara.
This is a fantastic.
Frankly, yeah.
And it weighs, it's a brick because it's full of wood.
Full of wood.
Awesome.
Beautiful on the board and just such a cool theme. So, the next two on my list, I'm going to actually do them together because they're kind of a series.
Yes.
Sorry. One game, this game here, this is the second game in the series, Knights of Fire. This was designed in partnership with David Turksey and Brian Train. And it is a game that deals with the revolution in Budapest in the 1950s. 1956. The first game in the series, Days of Ire, Budapest 1956, was not designed with that team. But both of these games are about area control. One uses counters, the other one uses blocks. So there's some slight difference there. But the concept is the same. You've got an overpowering opponent, the Soviets. Soviets have tanks and military, and they have garrisons, and they can control things. And the poor revolutionaries kind of are a hodgepodge mix of different unit types with some different abilities. And it's a game where you're trying to collect the cards that you need to activate those units, to allow them to take their special actions, to disable the Russian tanks, or to blow up garrisons, or get rid of those things. And very similar to Brave Little Belgium, these games are not about winning, necessarily. Meaning, the Budapest revolutionaries are not going to destroy the Russians.
It's about not dying.
It's about not dying, and not dying quickly enough. The other cool element that really comes into these games, and this isn't a review, but it's that concept of public opinion, world opinion. Did the Soviets rough up the revolutionaries enough that people got concerned, or
international opinion just plummeted?
So kind of an interesting concept, but a very simple system of activation. I would say Knights of Fire is more complex than Days of Ire. I would think you would want to start with this one first, get a feel for the system, because it's used in this game, just some more elements are added.
With that being said, I've never played this.
You have never played this one?
I have played this.
Yes.
And it was very easy to learn nonetheless.
Yeah, it was.
I don't know about this one, but Knights of Fire also has a solo mode.
Yes.
And it has a co-op version as well.
Yes.
So this one, you get some good variability with how many players you've got. You can do a lot with this one too.
Yeah. But a fun game. This came off of Kickstarter, I think, in 2019. We had done a preview video for it, but I enjoyed both these. I played this one with our Holy Euro style gaming crowd. They enjoyed it.
Okay, that's good to know.
This one you and I played together. I have not played that with them, but I think this is a good introduction to that. Once again, conflict, area control, movement of units, and then once again, just kind of surviving.
Yeah.
So, but good games. Both of them are good games, well made. Very pleased to have these on my shelf.
Yes.
So there you go.
My next game that I wanted to talk about is Wild Blue Yonder.
Sorry.
So this is part of what's called the Down in Flames series, which has been around for a long time, and there is a billion titles in this series, a lot of which are out of print. But Wild Blue Yonder is the most recent publication,
like 2018, I think,
in this series, 2017, I believe, from GMT. This is it's a tactical air-to-air combat game.
Using nothing but cards.
Yes, in this one you will typically have yourself in a plane, and you will have a wingman. So you really control 2 planes. And I think this game can play up to, gosh, I think this one plays 4 people.
Probably.
It says 2 or more, so I think it can support a lot. You can get into some pretty crazy dogfights, but 2 players just fine. You have yourself and a wingman, and then you have this deck of your cards, and you have a separate deck of cards. I believe they're identical.
Yes, they are.
And those cards are what's going to kind of fuel the game. Those cards you're going to do maneuvers with. You're going to do attacks with.
Corkscrew die.
All this kind of stuff. And what happens is I'm trying to get an advantageous position on you. And so I play a maneuver. I'm saying like, oh, I'm going to like come out of the sky.
Barrel roll or out of the sky, yeah.
And then he's looking at his hand and does he have a card that directly counters that? And he's going to play that to directly counter that. And he might have a corkscrew. And then I'm like, okay, well, do I have something that counters a corkscrew? And so you're playing these back and forth cards, almost like a war style game, right?
Yeah, it's almost like tag. It's like tag, you're it. I have to play a card to get you it. And then it's just back and forth. It's really fun. Very fun.
But you can't usable cards, right?
Yeah, because then you have nothing and you're dead.
Yeah, because then it's going to flip to your turn, and then I don't have any cards, so he's just like, I get advantage on you, I'm going to shoot you.
Yeah.
So you have to be very, very careful about how and when you allow, you're like, okay, it's not worth pursuing this course of action.
Yeah.
Or you take a shot, and you're like, do I throw in this extra card, or should I keep it to defend myself in your turn? And then once the round's over, you'll get a few more cards, depending on speed and altitude, which is pretty cool. But you get really neat positioning. It can play a lot of people, but it's not massively complicated.
No.
The game is really big, but that's because it has so much stuff in it. There's like 4 huge decks of different fighters that you can be. You're managing your like speed, and you have all these different values so that we can compare.
And I think in this game, it is all just cannons, right? It's all machine guns. Now, we've played Down in Flames Locked On from Dan Burson games, which had missiles.
Yeah.
This, you can take a hit and usually survive. Usually. Not always. Usually.
Yeah, it depends.
Usually takes 2 hits to kill you.
Yeah, you get raked and you're like...
Yeah. In those other ones, 1 missile shot, you're done.
Yeah, you get hit by a Sparrowhawk, it's over.
Yeah, you're done.
So, but this is a nice package for introduction
because
it has a rule book. It's got nice learn to play stuff in it as well. It has a ton of stuff in it.
Yeah.
So you don't need to buy anything else. You just get this. And it's just fun, and you can play it with lots of people if you're so inclined.
And I think the best part is games last anywhere from 10 minutes to 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know that you're ever going to see a game go over 20 minutes.
I don't think it can. I think
because it's just so quick.
Yeah.
So you can play 3 or 4 games in an hour and have a really good time. You could do like a best out of 5.
They hold tournaments of this stuff and big events.
Just really fun. So this is a great game. I think spouses would love this. I think casual friends would enjoy it. Maybe they'd be turned off because it's war or war themed, but it's a very solid game. When we got this in 2017, we had a great time with it. And once again, it's one of those games that you're going to have a good time no matter what happens.
Yes.
You can get shot out of the sky, you're still going to be like, oh, that was really fun.
Yeah, and
very cool.
Who cares? It was 5 minutes. Let's just set it up again.
Set it up again and you go again. Or you change out planes and try different things.
Also, some of the best artwork of all time.
Oh, fantastic. From GMT Games, they always do a good job.
Yeah, Antonis Karadas does the best artwork, frankly, when it comes to war games. But yeah, this is Wild Blue Yonder. This is a big thumbs up for me. This is a really nice place to start. If you're interested in air war and you like small little head-to-head card games, it doesn't look small, but it is on the table. Really, really good way to go.
So my final game on this list is Normandy Undaunted. And you might be aware of this. There's an expansion coming out. It's Normandy Undaunted North Africa from David Thompson and Osprey Games. A fantastic deck builder where you are controlling squads of soldiers during World War II that are going out on a offset tile map, and you're trying to take objectives.
Yep.
And you play your cards. You have a rifleman card. You're going to shoot or move your rifleman. If you follow that up with another rifleman card, guess what? You get to shoot that guy again or move him again. And it's a concept of trying to destroy your opponent's deck by killing his rifleman cards, where he has to get rid of them. So then he has to focus on buying new cards, so then you can focus on objectives. So it's that concept of back and forth, deck building, kind of destroying that deck of your enemy, and then obtaining objectives. And the games last 40 to 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I think they're very fun. There's a string of scenarios that...
There's quite a few, yeah.
Yeah, has enough for everybody. And I think this is a game that teaches those concepts of tactical, maneuvering and firing. And, you don't want to take a shot always when it's your worst shot. When it's three range and you have to roll an 8 on a 10-sided die, you might want to move up and you get, all of a sudden it's a 7, or you use a different unit and you roll 2 dice. And it just teaches a lot of concepts about managing small squads of soldiers on a board.
And I'll say this one, similarly to something like Memoir 44, it's these war games that are made by Eurogame companies. Mm-hmm. You get really nice production value. The artwork on this is off the chain.
Yeah.
It looks great. It feels great. It's in this nice little small package.
Yep.
But you get really, like you said, you get good tactical kind of learning. Mm-hmm. I set up a machine gun to put down a fire base, and then I move my scouts ahead, and then I send in my rifle teams.
Yeah.
Little bits and pieces like that will make a transition into something like Combat Commander or Lock and Load Tactical or Old School Tactical that much easier, because you're not being overwhelmed with what should I do. You learn what should you do in something like this.
Yeah.
And then you get into a bit more of the crunch if that's something you're interested in.
And like a lot of these games we've talked about, I think the rules are very simple. They're fairly clear. It's easy to teach younger children. This one I think you might need to be around 10 or higher to play, but a smart 8-year-old could get it.
Maybe.
But the strategy is really where the game, you learn, I got to use these cards this way, doing these things, taking care of the bad cards in my deck, and what do they call those? Fog of War, I think.
Yeah.
Getting rid of those so that I draw better cards. So there's a lot of really cool familiar mechanics there, but also some of that conflict, dice rolling, area control, taking objectives, etc. A very good time. We've played this 4 or 5 times. I've never not had a good time.
Yes.
Even when I was getting beat, I was having a good time because I was trying to figure out how to get back in.
Because it's interesting.
Yeah.
The mechanics are something fun to play with.
Yeah.
And that's important. So I think that's most of the introductory games I want to talk about today. There's obviously a trillion more. If you've got any suggestions, things we didn't mention, put them in the comments for people to read. And everyone's going to moan that we didn't put Twilight Struggle on the list.
And we love Twilight Struggle.
You all know about Twilight Struggle.
It's just not necessarily a war game.
No, and that's a game that you're going to transition out of heavy Eurogaming into wargaming potentially.
Yes.
If you've never played a game before, I'm not going to give you that, because it is quite rules intensive.
Yeah.
And there's some exceptions and there's some tactics. It's very, very good.
Yeah.
And I would recommend it to everyone, but you want someone experienced to really teach you that one probably.
And the other thing we've always said about a game like Twilight Struggle is someone who's played it 4 or 5 times is going to absolutely crush somebody that's played it only 1 or 2 times. So
and it won't be
compare.
Close.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's my excuse for that. I don't know if I have any others. Just off
the C&C games are all, I think, introductory. Napoleonics, I think, takes it up a notch, so I wouldn't say that's an introductory one, but Ancients...
You could really play any of those.
Yeah.
But I think the ones we talked about, Memoir, Ancients, and Battle Cry, are probably the simplest.
The real entry ones.
So those are really, you can pick those up very, very quickly and easily.
You will notice that we didn't mention any coin games in this video because we don't believe those are necessarily introductory. We feel like you've got to have a basis of those concepts to really move to that. If there were any of those coin series games, I think Cuba Libre would be one.
Probably Cuba Libre. I maybe even would say Andean Abyss.
Yeah, Colonial Twilight as well, because it's 2-player. But, some of those are very complex. Falling Sky and Fire in the Lake and Liberty or Death. Those are very complex games. Pendragon. Pendragon isn't necessarily a traditional coin game. It's very different. A fantastic game.
It's so good.
But I don't know that those should be your first experiences in that system.
No, yeah. If you start on the earlier end of those games is where it's the most simple, the most streamlined. And Cuba Libre is a nice one because tactically there's not many spaces.
Yeah.
So your decision space isn't as overwhelming. So it's easier to focus on learning the rules and how your pieces function.
So one question I think someone might ask is, what about introductory Hex Encounter? war games. A lot of the games we've talked about today, it's, cards, deck building, blocks. What about someone that wants to dive into a hex encounter, operational war game? What Dark Sands, I thought, was fairly straightforward. There weren't as many units on the board.
Yeah. Dark Sands would be okay. I would say something like the Market Garden series
by Paul Koenig.
Yes.
Eindhoven, Nijmegen.
Those are small enough and simple enough.
They use concepts like zones of control.
I don't know how hard it is to get a hold of those now that Victory Point games.
Yeah, I doubt they're reprinting them. You'd have to find them on the second-hand market.
I would also have said the Napoleonic 20 series.
Yep.
That was neat.
But that's Victory Point
games. Yeah, that's probably also not available anymore.
You might be able to find them on the secondary market.
Yeah. Those are really nice places to start.
Yeah. I would also say No Retreat, the Russian front. Because the game doesn't have more than 20 counters on the map at one time.
Yeah, I guess from that standpoint.
So there's not a lot of choices. It's kind of move these 7 or 8 stacks and attack, and the card play's fairly comfortable for those who have played card games, or I feel like that's more of an introductory level hex encounter game. Those would be my entries. Probably the Dark Sands and No Retreat, the Russian front.
That's probably fair. I would say pick up something like, oh gosh, is it C3I35 that had Gettysburg in it, or was it 36?
Not this most recent one, but last year's
version.
It
was the one that was published in 2008.
19. Yeah. Right?
No,
18.
Yeah, 18.
19 was Waterloo.
Yeah. So the C3I from 2018. I forget the number. I think it's 35.
Yeah.
That has it's a single small map.
15 counters.
Yeah, very, very nice, easy, a half-hour game of Gettysburg.
That'll get you started. That'll get you started.
That's a really good way to learn Hex Encounter as well, I think.
So, I mean, we shared today a lot of games that aren't necessarily Hex Encounter or traditional war games. But if you want those Hex Encounter, I think those 3 or 4 recommendations work.
But you build on these, and then you can jump into a lot of Hex Encounter out of that, frankly.
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
So that's our kind of discussion about some introductory war games. Again, any questions, any suggestions, stick them in the comments. I've been Alexander from theplayersaid.com.
And I'm Grant.